so we're on Module 12A, Marine Science, the first of 2 weeks on this. And so this is part of biology as well. So what is my degree in?
Microbiology?
Microbiology, yeah. Yeah, microbiology. All right, so but you can get a degree in marine biology if you like. That's kind of fun. You end up doing a lot of field work, and what I mean by field work is you're going out to places where you will find marine plates. So in other words, you'd be at the beach a lot if you got a marine science degree. Okay. All right, so here we go. What page are y'all on?
92.
92. Marine biology studies the organisms that live in or around the ocean. That means anything living, including plants and animals and fungi and algae are huge in the ocean. Those are all the living things. Typically, when you take a marine biology course, you will also study things like the salinity of the water, how salty is it, the temperature of the water and how that makes a difference, the pressure of the water, how that makes a difference for animals that live there. All right, so we're looking there at a sea turtle in looks like a bed of coral. So we'll talk about these in turn. I think we'll look at turtles specifically tomorrow. All right, so marine ecosystems. An ecosystem is a community of organisms that interact with each other in their physical environment. So when we talk about ecosystems, we will also include non-living things or abiotic things. In other words, the temperature, the salinity, that kind of thing, in addition to the living things in there. And so, for instance, you may or may not know that coral reefs need to be in fairly shallow, warmish water. And so if the water is really, really deep, you will not find a coral reef there. Kelp forests grow in deeper, colder water. So you don't find those in the same place that you find coral reefs, because they have different habitats, different preferences for their life cycle. All right, so if we look at the ocean, we can see it actually is broken down into layers. We do that a lot, right? We do the atmosphere in layers. We do everything we do like this in layers. And that's because as we go deeper into the ocean, the pressure gets more intense, pushes on the animals, so they have to be able to withstand that. Furthermore, it gets darker. They can't see. Some of the animals living down there don't have any eyes because they don't need them, because they can't see anything anyway. And also it gets very, very cold down there at the bottom of the ocean. So all those things have to be accommodated for by the living things. For instance, down here at the bottom, since there's no sunshine and it's very cold and it's very salty, there's no plants down there. No, plants are all right up here in the very, very top region. Yes?
How cold would it be?
It gets pretty good. It doesn't freeze. The water doesn't freeze, okay? But it is very cold. Not that water can't freeze. Up here we can see even salt water can freeze if it gets cold enough. But typically salt water is very difficult to freeze. Salt keeps it from freezing.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why they put salt on icy roads, because it breaks up the ice. Okay, so we have names for these. The epipelagic zone, also known as the photic zone, meaning there's sunlight gets there. The mesopelagic and the bathypelagic. The bathypelagic is what we call the abyssal plain, the abyss, the deepest part of the ocean right there. And in my next year I'll be teaching a marine biology class. And it's a lot of fun because we learn about all these animals, all these regions. It gets kind of difficult having to remember all these regions, how far they go down, things like that. But we end up, I take the class down to the coast for a field trip. Yeah, so we have fun doing that. All right, what are the oceans? Are you supposed to label these? Do you have a picture of the thing?
Yes.
Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 oceans. Is that right? The Pacific is the largest and the deepest. That's on our west coast, California side. The Atlantic is the next largest. It's on our east coast, the New York side. All right, then we have the Arctic up here, southern down here, and Indian Ocean over by Africa and India. So let's see, do you have something else? I have this. Does that help you, or is that better? Or is this better?
They're the same.
About the same? Okay. I'm not sure why America and Australia and England, I guess those are the English-speaking nations. I'm not quite sure why they're colored red and everything else is not red. There are other English-speaking nations out there. Suriname. No, not Suriname. Aruba. Jamaica. Ooh, I want to take you. Nobody Beach Boys fan? That's the beginning of a song. Aruba, Jamaica. When I wanna take her.
Is it old?
Key Largo. It's Beach Boy old, yeah, so 1950s. Who are the Beach Boys?
Oh, I know you said that.
Yeah, the Beach Boys are awesome. They influenced the Beatles. The Beatles said that they thought they were the greatest band. Anyway, they were in the 50s.
Okay.
Your mom will know who the Beach Boys are. I think they're all still alive.
You must be pretty old.
Yes, older than me. They were famous before I was alive. All right, we have our oceans written down then? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, here it is just again showing you, the Earth, of course, is round, so therefore the Pacific Ocean wraps around over here. So Japan also has the Pacific Ocean on its side there, because it's round, obviously. All right, topography. When you look out at the land on our country, you can see we have flat spots, we have mountain spots, we have deep spots, we have oceans, we have all those things. We have waterfalls. All of those structures we see on top of the land are also under the ocean. All right, they're just lower. And because they're lower, that's why the water's there, okay, because they're the lowest spot. And so we can see there are mountains under the ocean. Some of them reach to the surface. Those become islands. There was one time a guy, he actually serves in Congress still, I think, to this day, Congress in Washington, D.C., and he was talking about an island, and he said, there's so many people on that island, if they all move to one side, the whole island will flip over. And I don't know if he was kidding, but I think he was being serious, thinking that islands are floating on the ocean. They're not. They're connected to the bottom of the ocean, okay? Most of them are built by volcanic activity. Hawaii is that way. Hawaii's there was a hot spot, and it sent up stuff and made an island. Then the hot spot moved, made another island, and now it's the big island. It's still making that one with active volcanic activity. We have the continental shelf. So right here in the epipelagic photic zone, the continental shelf is where most of the life is. That's because that's where plants can get plenty of sunshine, and therefore they're the bottom of the food pyramid. And then we get down to the continental slope. Depending on where we are, the continental rise, and it comes to the abyssal path. And down here, the deepest parts of the ocean are called trenches. So the deepest thing we know on the planet is the Marianas Trench out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And interestingly, when you get to a place like this, because of the difference of the temperatures of the water, you can actually have an underwater waterfall. And it falls just as fast as a waterfall on land. It's kind of weird, right? It just takes a current down there to it. Ocean layers, here we have our epipelagic zone. So what do they want you to write this? Shade zones?
It's already on there.
Oh, it's already on there. Okay. So the sunlight zone would be the epipelagic zone, also known as
They just want
photic.
us to use different colors and shade in the boxes.
Oh, are these the colors they tell you to do?
It says
Is that why I did it?
shade 5 basic ocean layers, a different color according to water depth.
Okay. So anybody got any color pencils?
I do.
I would go yellow or greenish or light with the top because sunlight's coming in, yeah? And then I'd go dark for those little ones down there. Dark blues. So we have in the twilight zone, we have low light. The midnight zone, no light. The abyssal and the deeps, and then the trenches are they call it the Hadal zone. It's like Hades, you know? Really, really down there. Everybody good? I might have some color pencils. I probably have markers, but they would be too dark. You could always, if you don't have them, you can always do it. Uh-oh, gravity. I can get it, baby. I'm close. You got it?
Yeah, I
There we
usually.
All right, so tell me, the words are already there, all you have to do is shade them, is that correct? Right? Oh, highlighters would be nice. Highlighters would work great. Somebody left this cool pen here. It's called, I don't know if anybody recognizes this one. It's called Mr. Pen Sleek. I thought it was a marker. I think it's wax.
It's a what's it called? Highlighter.
But I don't think it's not a marker.
I don't know, erasable. It's a highlighter.
I'm just talking about the material that it's made. It's like a crayon. Versus,
It might be
I meant to look
the
it up.
Bible highlighter.
Okay, I'm gonna.
It's jelly. It's like gel, right?
Yeah, it's more like a crayon. Oh, it does smudge a little bit. It does highlight the words though. If anybody wants to use this orange one, it doesn't belong to any of y'all. Okay, somebody left it in here. That's how I get most of my cool pens from y'all.
Here you go.
Okay, how we doing? Good. Oh, it's the whole box. Gotcha. Okay.
I just like
What'd you realize, man?
the sky. But I
Uh-oh,
accidentally
Sky,
said
boo. So we just had switched those. I'm sorry, I also did not see that that top thing said Sky. Looks like everybody's got it, right? Everybody colored the top one yellow, green. I should have put Sky above there, I'm sorry, I did not. Kinda weird to include the sky in it. It has clouds in it. Okay, I'm gonna move on, y'all can, fix that at home or whatever. Keep working on that at home, y'all are taking too much time. Alright, ocean architecture, the bottom of the ocean, remember we have our shelf, our slope, our rise, our floor. The continental crust and the oceanic crust, we have the abyssal plain, I put it right in there, so about 5,000 meters down. The continental crust is mostly made up of a rock called granite, and the oceanic crust is mostly of a volcanic rock called basalt. And basalt is much more compressible, so it gets smaller. Therefore, that's why it's the lowest part on the earth, and that's why the oceans are there. Okay, I'm looking for my book. Yeah. All right, we do have a blank coming up here. Here we go. Plankton. Plankton are tiny floating microorganisms that are important, a very important part of the ocean. Okay, so here's what I want you to remember about plankton. If something is plankton, it is floating. Okay, it's floating. It doesn't have any strength to overcome the current or the ocean waves. So if you're standing by the on the beach and you get hit by floating seaweed, the seaweed at that point is considered plankton. Okay, so and you can see it with your eyes. So not all of it is microorganisms, but the majority of the stuff we want to concern ourselves with in marine biology is the microscopic floating things. That would be all the algae that are out there. That's because algae and protozoans are the absolute basis of the life on the planet, really. They make about 85 to 89% of the oxygen that we breathe. So people talk about don't cut down trees. We need the oxygen. That's true. I love trees. I wish they wouldn't cut down as many trees. But the vast majority comes from our oceans. We need to make sure our oceans stay healthy. So if we looked at ocean water, we'd see a bunch of stuff floating in it. Here, this has little crabs and stuff. If they're small enough crabs, if they are taken up by a wave and moved, they are called plankton at that point. Jellyfish are considered plankton. All right, so what is the criteria for plankton? It is floating. Okay, that sounds like a quiz question to me, okay? Plankton floats. All right, cyanobacteria are a type of bacteria also known as blue-green algae, which is a misnomer. They perform photosynthesis and they fix nitrogen so that other organisms can use it. Fixing nitrogen is just making it bioavailable. Okay, so the nitrogen that's in the atmosphere isn't usable. It's interesting that it's there and we can't use it, so it has to be fixed. And the way it's fixed, have we discussed that it's fixed by in the atmosphere by lightning? That's something that fixes it. Certain plants on the earth, not in the ocean, have certain nodules that help fix it in the ground. Those are called legumes. So anything that grows in a pod, like a peanut or a green bean, those are called legumes. They fix the nitrogen. But the biggest and best nitrogen fixer would be the bacteria. And in the ocean, it's blue-green algae or cyanobacteria. They used to be called blue-green algae because they perform photosynthesis, and we didn't realize some bacteria could do that. And these do. Okay, you got all those 1, 2, 3 blanks there? Keep in mind, fixing the nitrogen is just mean it makes it bioavailable, makes it available for use by living things. All right, so if we take a closer look, like microscopically, at what these cyanobacteria look like, it's something like this. Remember, they're so small you have to use a microscope to see them. They kind of sometimes will be floating in mats or something like that. But you can see right here what will happen is, of course, light provides the energy that will create the glucose, and the glucose then can be available for making ATP for the organism. That's respiration. All right, unicellular algae are vital to the earth because they photosynthesize and make most of the world's oxygen. I mentioned that. It's seriously high 80%, maybe even up to 90% of the oxygen that we breathe is coming from these microorganisms in the ocean. We're looking at some right here. These are called Spirogyra. They're called that because they have really cool little spiral-shaped chloroplasts that fill the inside of the cells. So we can see that they're taking CO2 and H2O in, and they're putting oxygen into the ocean. That's another thing. Because photosynthesis creates oxygen, it puts it into the air, but it also puts it into the ocean. So animals that live in the ocean, like a fish, for instance, needs to breathe oxygen, and the way they breathe it is through their gills. And people think, well, H2O, the O from H2O is where they, no, that's water, right? They get the oxygen that's dissolved from photosynthetic activity. That's why in a fish tank you have to have a bubbler or something. It's putting the oxygen in the fish tank that way. All right, multicellular algae, that's what we can see with our eyes, also known as seaweed, provide food, oxygen, and shelter for many marine organisms. So in those colder parts where coral reefs are not possible to grow, kelp forests, giant kelp forests will actually provide a place for fish and things to hide in there. So it is kind of a nice little respite for them. Let's watch a little video on it.
So when otters eat urchins, they set about a huge cascade of changes in nearshore ecosystems. And a lot of those changes are really dramatic, and they're important changes. In many cases, I think they're changes that we've forgotten about. So sea otters eat urchins. The kelp grows very, very quickly. And I always tell people they should appreciate kelp because it does a lot of amazing things. Perhaps the most important thing it does is it increases the productivity of nearshore ecosystems. It's essentially dumping carbon into that system, and it's doing that by leaking into the water, and it's also breaking up into tiny little fragments, which in turn feed entire food webs that really are absent in systems without otters. And these are detritus-based food webs, so this is when we get little animals. We call them detritivores because they're eating kelp that are now feeding on that detritus. Those little tiny animals in turn go on to feed bigger animals. So that's the first thing kelp does, is increase productivity. The second thing kelp does, it's like any terrestrial forest. As that kelp grows towards the surface of the water, it provides habitat for all sorts of fish, for other animals, for things that live on the surface of kelp, for herring to spawn on. And there's been a lot of studies, for example, done showing that there are far more fish in kelp forests than in areas that are dominated by urchins. So number two thing, otters make kelp, kelp increases habitat. The third thing that kelp does that's a really interesting thing that we never think about is it slows down the movement of water. So as water comes through a kelp bed, it's slowed down. And that means that organisms that are living in that forest, say they're spawning and releasing their larvae, those larvae are now going to be entrained and retained in that kelp forest because the water movement has been slowed down. Instead of being scattered off to inappropriate habitat, they're now caught in that kelp forest. The fourth thing kelp forests do is they're natural breakwaters. They stop coastal erosion. You've probably heard about the Kelp Highway, this idea that people may have come into North America along the fringe of coastal British Columbia, traveling along kelp. Well, it would have been a beautiful still ocean inside that kelp fringe. Those are the four really important things that kelp does, and that kelp is, of course, made by sea otters eating urchins.
Okay, so that lady's probably a marine biologist. When she says that sea otters make kelp, they don't literally make it. What they do is they eat sea urchins. So sea urchins destroy kelp beds. All right, they're very, very damaging. And sea urchins, you think, oh, what sweet little, spiky critters, Oh no, they're destroying these kelp beds. So we have to keep a balance, right? So we have to make sure we have enough of the sea otters. Sea otters are adorable, right? Those are marine mammals. Those are the ones that float on their back, they're so cute, and the babies are so cute. And so that's what she meant by that. And that's why it's important for a healthy sea otter population to maintain a kelp area. All right. There are times that when the sea otters are not so productive that we go in and we pay people to capture sea urchins and kill them, bring them out and let them die. That's how I probably get my sea urchin samples, which I'll show you today. All right, plankton includes both phytoplankton. That would be phytoplankton means they're going to be performing photosynthesis. All right, they're going to be green, plant-based, if you will. Those include bacteria and algae. We also have zooplankton. Zooplankton are tiny little animals. Sometimes these little tiny animals are the larval form of a big, for instance, the teeny tiny baby of a crab would be considered a zooplankton. And then it grows bigger and becomes a crab, and it's no longer plankton because it can crawl on the ground, right? So it's no longer floating. So even fish larvae that are teeny tiny, when they come out of those little teeny tiny fish eggs, they'll be considered zooplankton for a little while until they grow bigger. Now, if we take some of those, you can see we have here the circle of life over here on the right. We have the green things that are performing photosynthesis, providing food for these little zooplankton over here, which provide food for the bigger fish, then the bigger fish, and then what do we have down here? Oh, the bacteria when they die, they break them down and send this stuff back up to be reused. All right, and so we can see up here the sun and the rain also have something to do with that. Now this is a microscopic slide of several different kinds of algae that we can find in the ocean. Like this long spiral one, that's the Spirogyra. Here's also a Spirogyra here with a big spiral on the lower left. You can see some of these really cool ones, like the circular ones. These are things called diatoms. That's what makes that stuff you may have heard of called diatomaceous earth. They have little glass, literally silicon dioxide cell walls. It's glass. And then we have other things right here, these different, photosynthetic creatures. This is a zooplankton. So these would be phytoplankton. Here's a zooplankton. Do you see it's a little animal?
It looks like a shrimp.
So maybe that, or it's got little tentacles. It might be a baby like octopus or squid or something. Okay, so our phytoplankton would be over here. Now, this kind of makes me mad a little bit. This slide on the left, it's got several animals in it. That would be an animal, that shrimp-looking thing, bug-looking thing, that jellyfish. So it makes me a little mad they don't just have phytoplankton. Zooplankton looks like that guy right there. That's a little shrimp, or perhaps a little thing called krill. So krill is a very, very small shrimp, about the size of, let's see, it's bigger than a grain of rice, not as big as your finger. I think I might have a picture coming up. All right, plants in the ocean consist mostly of grasses. We have two main kind of grasses. We have one called turtle grass. Who do you think eats that? Turtles. And we have eel grass, and most of the eels kind of hide in that. So different kinds of grasses. So the interesting thing about plants in the ocean is think about it, that you don't ever want to go put salt out in your garden, do you? Salt is not good for plants. And they're living in salt water here. So these are very highly adaptable living creatures here, these grasses. God's designed them to be able to withstand all that salt. They won't grow in super salty, saline areas. So they are mostly toward and they have to be near the sun. So they're in the photic zone where they can perform photosynthesis, shallow areas. Marine animals in the ocean are divided into invertebrates. That means they do not have a backbone. You know that. And vertebrates that do have a backbone. All right? Next week, we're going to talk about the vertebrates. And I got a critter right in here. A marine vertebrate right in that big box.
Alive?
Oh, no. It's preserved. I have a friend, one of the teachers at ODA would bring a fish tank with living creatures in it to all of her marine biology. She goes, I would kill them, right? If I'm sloshed into my car. I can't imagine how she did it. I don't know how she did it. But we'll be looking at invertebrates for the most part today. Okay, many marine animals don't look like animals. So invertebrates would be among these. We have an animal called a sponge. That's an animal, like SpongeBob. Yeah? We have animals called jellyfish and animals called corals. So here is a sponge. So when we see a sponge, it kind of reminds us more of something like a plant, but it's not a plant. Just like fungi are not plants. Why are mushrooms not plants? That was a quiz question. Why are mushrooms not plants? Because what?
Because it's a fungi.
Yeah. Why? Why isn't it in this? Why is it put? Why does it have its own kingdom?
No spores.
It doesn't perform photosynthesis, right? It has to eat its food else, like by eating dead things. So these guys, sponges, do not perform photosynthesis. They're not plants. They are what we call sessile, meaning they don't move. They find a place and they just adhere to that and they stay there. It's not that they can't move. Their little larvae can move and they go find a new place to attach themselves. All right, so there's a sponge. Here we have a jellyfish. Remember, they're special. They've got the bell on the top. Now, not all of them, all right, because there's something that we're going to look at today. I actually have in this box right here. It's called a sea anemone. It's in the same group as jellyfish, but it sits down and it sends its little tentacles upward, and those little upward tentacles they sting you, right? Not usually humans. They're not big enough. The stingers aren't. Now, can you get stung by a jellyfish? Oh yeah. Anybody been stung by a jellyfish? Whoo boy. We have them down at the coast of Texas and everything. People get, some of them are deadly. And this is a type of coral, called foliaceous coral. They come in different shapes and sizes and colors, true. All right, sponges are in a phylum called Porifera. Porifera meaning pore. Pore has a hole, right? A pore is a hole. And we can see there's holes all in it. I have a whole box of sponges and I couldn't find them to bring to you today. So I hope that my little box with just various things in it actually has a sponge. I think it must. I don't know. It should at least have one sponge in there. We'll see. All right, let's take a look at, this is a type of sponge right here. That's interesting. So what they generally do is this large area here is where the exit would happen. So water is pulled in through the sides. Let's go back here. Water is pulled in through the sides and exits through the top, through the osculum right here. And as it does it, it has these little cells called collar cells that beat the water and cause there to be a flow that pulls through that, and as it pulls through, all the little bits of plankton get caught in the parts of the collar cells, and an amoebocyte, a little special cell, comes in and eats it up. That's how they eat. So if I ask you how do sponges eat, you say they're filter feeders. They filter the water and eat the food out of them. Here's another one. So it'd be drawing in through the sides, and there's the top part right there coming out. They've got video of people putting dye around the bottom of a sponge, and it goes through and the dye comes right out the top. All right, and it's cleaner. They clean the ocean. All right, what do we got next? Okay, Cnidaria. Jellyfish, coral, sea anemone are in phylum Cnidaria. Starts with a C. It's a silent C. Cnidaria. We can see a jellyfish floating around right there. We'd like to avoid those. Remember, they can swim, but they cannot overcome the tide. Okay, they cannot overcome any kind of a water movement. So therefore, jellyfish are considered what? Because they're floating, they're considered plankton. Plankton. All right, good. So here's a big one. This is called a lion's mane jellyfish. Look how big it is. They can get even longer. Their tentacles can go down, I think, 60 feet long or so. Yes.
I can tissue.
Here. Here is a sea anemone, so think of a jellyfish upside down. Its tentacles are facing upwards, and in the middle right there, of course, is its mouth. And if we look at that a little more closely, there's the mouth part, here are the tentacles. So the tentacles will sting the creature that it's wanting to use as its food source. Yes? You have a question?
Doesn't on Finding Nemo,
Oh yeah.
the clownfish?
Yeah, it's famous. That's a famous symbiotic relationship between a clownfish and an anemone. The clownfish doesn't have, you know how fish are kind of slimy when you touch them? There's something in the clownfish's slime, it's actually missing something, that it's not affected by the sting. So the anemone it just stops stinging, it doesn't hurt it, right? So they hide in there, they also attract other fish to come there. So it works for both of them. So I'm going to show you this picture, kind of creepy. All right, here's a little shrimp that got caught with the tentacles. So the tentacles do deaden the prey, right? They do stun it. So then they're swallowed by this creepy mouth. I actually have an anemone we're going to cut open today. The dissection of it is fairly unremarkable. You look at it and say, well, it's kind of gooey. You know, there's not a lot to it. It's just got tentacles and a little gut, a stomach, and that's it. All right, so they have the stinger part of them is pretty cool. It's quite, look at this venom arsenal it says over here to the right. So the tentacle right here, it has a little specialized cell called a nematocyst, and it's stuck inside this little cell area here, okay? There's a little hair, and when the hair gets triggered, just like on a, one of those plants that close up, right? What are those called? Venus flytrap. It trips that little deal. Water floods into this and it sends out a harpoon, and the harpoon comes out, it sticks into you, then it sticks a venomous part in. Depending on what critter is hitting me, the venom can be bad. Mostly it stings you, but there's one jellyfish in Australia called the box jellyfish that if you don't get to the hospital within, I'm serious, like minutes, you're goners, man. It'll kill you. All right, here's how it works. So this gets tripped, water floods into that area, it sends out the barb and the thread that has the stuff on it. Here's a little deal that shows how we'll see how the water floods in, causing there to be that temperature differential, which will send that baby out. All right, phylum Mollusca. Some invertebrates have exoskeletons. That means on the outside of them, like a shell. For external protection, phylum Mollusca is a diverse phylum. We can see, you may know the name of that critter right there. Called a chambered nautilus. I don't have anything. I'll show. I actually have one to show y'all today. The shell of it. Was there anything on this slide you had to write down?
Yeah. Yes.
Really? What do you have to write down? I need to underline some stuff.
Exoskeletons.
Exoskeleton. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we do not have humans do not have an exoskeleton. We have an endoskeleton. Our skeleton's on the inside. These are creatures that have skeletons on the outside. Can you think of another one? As an exoskeleton?
Shrimp.
Shrimp, crab, those are all. Yeah, they have a hard outer. Any insect, pretty much any insect, has an exoskeleton. Think about a cricket, the crunch when you step on them, yeah? That's the exoskeleton, crunch. All right, so phylum Mollusca includes snails. Another word for it would be univalve. Univalve means one shell. We have clams. Bivalves means two shells, 1, 2. Some people are writing something down here, baby. I don't know what you're supposed to write down. Squid are called cephalopods. They're in the same phylum, and then the octopus. So these are the famous ones. Gastropods. Snails, univalves are gastropods, and then we have the bivalves, cephalopods, and octopus is also a cephalopod. Cephalopod means head foot, and gastropod means stomach foot for snails. All right, let's see one here. There's a snail. So I will tell you there's a difference between land snails and marine snails. One of the big ones is on the land, this critter right here, the eyes are on the tip of those stalks, just like they show in the cartoons. That is true. But on marine snails, the eyes are not. They have those stalks coming out, but their eyes are down here. And actually, marine snails are really creepy looking. Really creepy. Here's clam. So notice it's sticking something out there. It's actually called a foot, and they send that foot out. It looks kind of like a tongue, but the foot, and it allows them to bury themselves in sand, and then they can stick up a siphon, and the siphon will pull in water, and the water will be filtered by them. So they are also filter feeders. Clams are. Here's a squid. It's one of my marine biology kids' favorite dissections. This is when we dissect a squid. They don't have an exoskeleton. Notice they don't have a shell on the outside of them, so it's kind of weird that they're in the same group as these guys. But they do have something on the inside. It's not a skeleton, but it's a little firm structure called a pen, P-E-N, that gives them a little bit of structure. Oh, also they can move very, very well. I'll show you a picture in a second. They pull water through here, they squeeze it out through the siphon, and then these are the tentacles. So squid have 10 tentacles, 2 long ones and the rest are shorter. Here's an octopus, I think, moving. He's got 8, right? So he's putting water through and then squeezing it out through those siphons and moving fairly well through here. Here's another octopus, also called an octopus. We, of course, know that because of the 8 tentacles, right? And I think we're gonna look a little more closely at those tentacles. Let's watch a little something about, I guess, octopuses.
What could octopuses possibly have in
That is the
common
correct
with
photo,
us?
by the way.
After all, they don't have lungs, spines, or even a plural noun we can all agree on. But what they do have is the ability to solve puzzles, learn through observation, and even use tools, just like some other animals we know. And what makes octopus intelligence so amazing is that it comes from a biological structure completely different from ours. The 200 or so species of octopuses are mollusks belonging to the order Cephalopoda, Greek for head feet. Those heads contain impressively large brains, with a brain-to-body ratio similar to that of other intelligent animals, and a complex nervous system with about as many neurons as that of a dog. But instead of being centralized in the brain, these 500 million neurons are spread out in a network of interconnected ganglia, organized into 3 basic structures. The central brain only contains about 10% of the neurons, while the 2 huge optic lobes contain about 30%. The other 60% are in the tentacles, which for humans would be like our arms having minds of their own. This is where things get even more interesting. Vertebrates like us have a rigid skeleton to support our bodies, with joints that allow us to move. But not all types of movement are allowed. You can't bend your knee backwards, or bend your forearm in the middle, for example. Cephalopods, on the other hand, have no bones at all, allowing them to bend their limbs at any point and in any direction. So shaping their tentacles into any one of the virtually limitless number of possible arrangements is unlike anything we're used to. Consider a simple task, like grabbing and eating an apple. The human brain contains a neurological map of our body. When you see the apple, your brain's motor center activates the appropriate muscles, allowing you to reach out with your arm, grab it with your hand, bend your elbow joint, and bring it to your mouth. For an octopus, the process is quite different. Rather than a body map, the cephalopod brain has a behavior library. So when an octopus sees food, its brain doesn't activate a specific body part, but rather a behavioral response to grab. As the signal travels through the network, the arm neurons pick up the message and jump into action to command the movement. As soon as the arm touches the food, a muscle activation wave travels all the way through the arm to its base, while the arm sends back another wave from the base to the tip. The signals meet halfway between the food and the base of the arm, letting it know to bend at that spot. What all this means is that each of an octopus's 8 arms can essentially think for itself. This gives it amazing flexibility and creativity when facing a new situation or problem. Whether it's opening a bottle to reach food, escaping through a maze, moving around in a new environment, changing the texture and the color of its skin to blend into the scenery,
That's true.
or even mimicking other creatures to scare away enemies. Cephalopods may have evolved complex brains long before our vertebrate relatives, and octopus intelligence isn't just useful for octopuses. Their radically different nervous system and autonomously thinking appendages have inspired new research in developing flexible robots made of soft materials, and studying how intelligence can arise along such a divergent evolutionary path can help us understand more about intelligence and consciousness in general. Who knows what other forms of intelligent life are possible, or how they process the world around them.
Yeah, so it's true that the plural of octopus is octopuses. Why it's not octopi, but it is octopuses. Also, they not only do they change their color, they do change their texture. They got little spikes on them and stuff. It's crazy. You can put them on a chessboard, black and white chess, and they'll turn black and white. I'm not kidding. It's crazy. All right, arthropods. Marine arthropods have an exoskeleton. As they grow, they molt. They cannot, the exoskeleton, the hard covering on the outside of them, cannot grow. So they have to pop out of it. This one is, this red thing here is the new crab crawling backward out of the old crab. And then their new skeleton will harden. Insects do the same thing. Insects are also arthropods. There are insects in the ocean. Some. Crustacea, most marine arthropods are in class Crustacea, including these crabs. They have gills, walking legs, some have claws. There are some crabs that live on land as well. You've probably seen those at night at the beach, right? You can go out crabbing and they're crawling all over the beach in the dark, pretty fun.
Pincher toes.
Yes, indeed. Anything to underline on this slide?
No.
No? Okay. Echinodermata, one of my favorites. These are, echinodermata means spiny skin. And so we're going to see sea stars are in this group, so starfish. A group of animals called sand dollars are in here. Sea urchins, we talked about the sea urchins earlier. Oh, I'm going to forget that last one. It's sea cucumbers. Okay, sea urchins, remember these are the ones that destroy kelp forests. They're pretty cool though. I have some tests to show you. That's the shell that they have. Underneath all these spikes right here, they have a shell, a round shell. And then these are the sea cucumbers, or sometimes sea pickles, they're called. And they do look like long cucumbers with a softer body on the outside. All right, tube feet. Sea stars have a water vascular system and tube feet. That allows them to stick to things. They can crawl upside down on something. Sand dollars also have little tube feet, much smaller. If you've ever captured a live sand dollar before and you hold on your hand, they'll crawl, off your hand. If you put them on your stoop of the door because you're going to take them home from the beach, they'll crawl away. So they can move. Do you have a question?
Can you go back a couple?
Here?
Yeah.
Were you supposed to write something down there? Okay.
Echinodermata.
Echinodermata. Spiky skin. That's the word you have to write down? Echinodermata?
Yep.
So I need to underline this word?
Yeah.
Okay,
And
phylum
sea
Echinodermata.
stars.
And you need I have to underline sea stars. Okay.
Has it 10?
No, I got 15 minutes. We're not even starting our lab here yet. Okay, we good? There's our urchins and our cucumber. Okay, tube feet, we got that? Blank written in? Okay. They use that to create a very strong pull, and we can see a starfish right here opening up a clam, which is really hard to open. And then crazy deal, they actually take the sea star, the starfish, sends its stomach out of its body into the clam and eats it in there, and then sucks its stomach back in. Crazy stuff. All right, so here's the outside looking at right here. We can see the spiny skin here. This is called the madaperitis on the top. It helps with the water flow through the system here. The tube feet coming through here. You can't really see the mouth. It's under there. The stomach, it pushes out the other way to do that. Okay, review. Porifera are the sponges. Oh, that's P. Porifera are the sponges. I think you're putting a P by that then on the bottom? Yeah? Oh, okay, we have a lot. There's some sponges. Cnidaria, a C. There we have the sea anemone. Is a C. I'm sorry, yeah, C for Cnidaria. Sea anemone. Jellyfish.
For C?
C. We're still on C. Is jellyfish on there?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. And another one would be coral. Oh, there's a sea anemone. You know what this one was, y'all? That's coral. So put it on coral, jellyfish, and sea anemone. The letter C. You had P on just sponges, yeah? All right. M for mollusca. M. These have a lot in there. So we have a squid. We have an octopus. We have clams. Does it say clams? Okay. Okay, that was it. Just 3 of them. Arthropoda, the arthropods. A. This is A. I didn't put A up there. A for, is that a lobster? Yep. A for lobster. A for crab. That's all I have. Echinodermata, those are the spiny skin. We have the sand dollar. We have the urchin, the sea urchin. And do we have everything filled in now? Yeah? We're good? Oh, sea star, there it is, sorry. Sea star. Starfish.
Yeah.
Now everything's filled in? Okay, now it's time for lab. Okie dokie. Let's see how much lab